Tonight's episode of Get Better Basketball Live, I have Kramer Soderberg, who's an assistant basketball coach at Millikin University, and he's going to talk about the mover blocker offense. You're not going to want to miss this one. Another Get Better Basketball Live is up next. Hi, everyone. This is Coach DeMarco with another Get Better Basketball Live. I am here today with Kramer Soderberg, assistant basketball coach at Millikin University. How are you doing today, Coach?
Hey, John, how's it going? Appreciate you having me. I'm excited to talk some hoops with you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you. I know that we're going to talk about the mover blocker offense today, which I'm very excited to learn more about. I know that teams at different levels use it, and it's something I've always wanted to definitely learn about. Before we jump into that, I know you have a pretty extensive background in basketball. So could you tell me a little bit about your background in basketball as a player and then as a coach as well?
Yeah. So I'm a coach's kid, born and raised in the gym. My dad's been a lifelong college basketball coach. Been at many different stops, University of Wisconsin under Dick Bennett, and then he was the head coach at St. Louis University, and then now he's the assistant coach under Tony Bennett at Virginia. So I've been around the game that way, and they always say coaches' kids either fall in love with the game or they run away from the game, and I happen to fall in love with it. So and then my basketball career, I had a really successful high school career. Was named Gatorade Player of the Year and St. Louis Post-Dispatch Player of the Year my senior year. Went on to play 2 years at Miami of Ohio in the MAC, which was a really good experience for me. And then I transferred to Lindenwood University to play for my dad for my junior and senior year. After that, I was an assistant coach under my father for 3 years at Lindenwood. And then when he went to Virginia as an assistant, I came to Millikin as an assistant. So I'm going into my 8th season in the coaching business, and it's quite a whirlwind, as we all know, but it's been good. I've had a good journey thus far.
Well, Coach, I noticed as I was checking out your website and prior to us getting into the offense, I noticed that you also wrote a book, which is pretty amazing because to be able to coach and then be an author, just sounds like you do so many different things. So could you tell us a little bit about your book before we get into the mover blocker?
Yeah. My book is a little bit off topic with what we're going to hit today. It's called Fill Your Cup for Christ. So it's a spiritual based book. The subtitle is A Spiritual Journey Sown and Grown Through Sports. So I kind of take my journey through athletics and how that cultivated my faith life. It was something that challenged me, but it was good. Long bus rides, I had a lot of time to write and think, and it's been a great journey so far, and I hope it can help a lot of people's spiritual lives, drawing them closer to Christ and such.
And if people want to get that book, they could actually check out your website. Is it KramerSoderberg.com?
Yep, KramerSoderberg.com, or they could just go to Amazon and find the title there. So you just type in Fill Your Cup for Christ with my name, and it'll pop right up for you.
That's awesome. That's so cool that you wrote a book. That's something that I've thought about for a long time, and I'm kind of in the works a little bit. But that's awesome that you were able to do that with everything else that you're doing. So as we jump into the mover blocker offense now, and we're going to get into some of the basics in a couple of minutes. But can you tell me how you learned about this offense?
So a little disclaimer before we start: the term mover blocker has recently been coined to describe Virginia's motion offense. However, traditional mover blocker offense isn't necessarily what Virginia runs. So the traditional mover blocker offense, where I learned that, was at UW Wisconsin when I was a youngster, and my dad was, Dick Bennett's assistant coach, and they went to a Final Four in 2000. They ran a true motion mover blocker, 3 movers, two screeners, and there were no rules. There were no, systematic cutting and all that. It was free motion motion. But Tony at Virginia kind of took the basics of his dad's mover blocker offense and kind of honed in the rules a little bit. So what we're going to speak on tonight is Virginia's mover blocker offense, but I always make the disclaimer that it's not true motion, in that the guys, the cutters and the screeners, are going to have some things that they know are going to happen. It's not completely random. So that disclaimer there. But yeah, as I was mentioning, I learned this system, from my dad, from Dick Bennett and Tony Bennett, watching a lot of film of Virginia. We ran this offense at Lindenwood University. Me and my dad did when we were there, and then I ran it for 2 years at Millikin when I got there. So I've kind of gathered as much information as I can from speaking to my dad and speaking to Tony and watching film, and it's a really, really good offense. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy learning about it and just the ins and outs of the system.
When you used the mover blocker, was it the more traditional style when your dad used it, or is it more of the, I guess I'll call it like mover blocker 2.0, so to speak,
Yeah.
the one that Tony Bennett is now using at Virginia with some different actions and stuff out of it?
Yeah. What we ran at Lindenwood and at Millikin my first 2 years, what is Virginia's mover blocker. But I have, as a player, I have run, when I was a player at Lindenwood, we ran traditional mover blocker. And that, again, similar ideas of reading screens and all that stuff, basic motion principles, but less strictness to where you have to go and where you have to be. So I think both are really good. I think the true mover blocker motion is harder to teach, takes longer for the kids to pick up. And I think Tony found a beautiful balance between true motion and like a continuity flex offense. So I would say those are the two extremes of offenses. You can have a true motion and you can have a flex offense, and Tony kind of found a sweet spot right in the middle where he's got a combination of both the mover blocker action of reading screens and reading the defense and reacting accordingly, but also getting the guys knowing where they're going and specific spots they're supposed to be. So I think it's a good combination of both.
So before we jump into the basics, I have to ask, and that sounds like one reason that you really like it. What's the best thing about using the mover blocker offense? What is it that you like so much about it?
Well, yeah, I think any motion, if run correctly, whatever the defense does, they're going to be wrong. So the basic principles of any motion is that the screeners screen, the movers move, the movers read the screeners, or read the defenders, and the screeners read the movers. So if I'm a cutter and I come off a screen, as most coaches know, and my man chases me over the top, I'm going to tight curl. If he shortcuts the screen, I'm going to flare. If he overplays, I'm going to back cut, so on and so forth. Same thing with the big guy, the guy who's setting the screen. If he sees me tight curl, he's going to pop. If he sees me flare, he's going to dive. Okay. So all that reaction and reading of the defense is what makes these offenses so good, because no matter what the opposing team decides to do, they should be wrong if you are reading the screens correctly. If you've taught your players well, the defense will always be behind the play because of the screen and because of the read of the screen.
So can you take us through just kind of the basics of the beginning? Where do you start as a coach when you're trying to incorporate the mover blocker offense? And then later on, as we get into it, I do want to follow up with a question about reading those screens and think about, how we can teach players that. But I guess first, what are the basic concepts within the offense?
Yeah, so first and foremost, to start this offense, you have to get a wing entry. Okay. And you can do that in a number of different ways. You can start with simple down screens. You can Iverson cut. You can cross the guards underneath. You can just fake like you're going to run down and pop and catch it on the wing. So you have to get a wing entry catch. I'm going to try to draw it up so that everybody can see just the basic action. We're trying to get a wing entry to start the offense. Okay. So once we get this wing entry, we basically have 3 spots that the guards, the movers, have to fill. the top spot, which would come from probably the point guard who made the wing entry. The other guard who, might have been cutting this way, he wants to fill this spot right here. And then the two bigs have very important positional spots. The backside big, most important rule of this offense for a screener is the backside big is always high. When the ball is away from him, the backside big is always high. So this big, which I'll mark as a B, he's away, which means he's up in the elbow area high. The ball side big, wherever the ball's on your side, you're posting strong on the block, okay? So that's the basic formation of this offense once you get a wing entry. And then there's just basic action from that. Once the ball, and the term we used at Lindenwood was trigger dribble, so trigger like a gun. And when this ball handler triggers, when he attacks the middle, two actions happen simultaneously. First is the flare screen. Second is the baseline screen. And the reason I say first and second is, although these are happening simultaneously, because this cut is a little bit shorter, it happens, the timing is such where this one will happen first, this one will happen second, okay? So this is option one, this is option two, and then to go a little further, if option two isn't open, the big will rescreen, and that's option three, and he'll come off the rescreen, okay? So that right there is just the basic of basic of the offense. Those rules, those positionings are what you need to know first. You got to get a wing entry. Once you get a wing entry, you're filling the 3 spots by the guards, and the bigs are filling their 2 spots. Most importantly, backside big has to be on the backside elbow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Coach. And in terms of, so once you get into those, that's the basic action. Are there other things? So it sounds like with Virginia now, they have some other things that are maybe more set-based or diagrammed that they're doing versus kind of the free-flowing action. So what are some of the things that they do that you really like, or maybe even like a next step from that basic action?
Yeah, so within the basic action, there's a couple reads that happen. If off of the flare screen, so if we get the big here, guard with the ball here, off of this flare screen, if you get a perimeter catch off the flare screen, as so, then you'll be into this position, ball here, big man who just set the flare screen here, guard who made the pass will be here, guard on the backside will cut through, there'll be a big here. Then you follow into an open side ball screen here, which a lot of coaches will like. The rules stay the same. As a backside big, your job is to be high when the ball's away from you. So as this ball screen is happening, you get a backside flare and an open side ball screen. So that's a little action that we've had as a call. We can make a call to do that, but then it's also a systematic thing that happens within the offense. So our players know whenever there's a flare screen and a perimeter catch off that flare screen, the big guy knows to follow with a ball screen, and we get that open side ball screen.
What I really liked about that, Coach, is as that player is rolling to the basket, you have the other big who's rising up, and I think there's a nice opportunity to hit them on that roll. It puts a little bit of pressure on the help defender there to stay home.
Exactly.
And, so as that action's taking place, I guess I have like a 2-part question here is, what's the next step, that could happen? But also, are there possessions in this offense where you may not start with that basic action, but you kind of finish with it, where like you might run the first 15 seconds. There's some other actions in this offense that you might run. And then if that doesn't work, the team kind of flows naturally into, this type of basic action, or is that always something that happens at the beginning?
Yeah, I would say what's more common than, running something different within the offense and then into this basic action, what we do most often, and what I've seen Virginia do, is they will run a set play, maybe trying a set play that has nothing to do with this offense, trying to run that first and then flow into this out of that. But I mean, this action that we've seen is the offense. It is the offense. And when they're running this motion, that's what they do. They throw it to the wing and they get into it. That's what we did at Lindenwood in Virginia. You mentioned a great point you mentioned off the ball screen is how difficult this is to defend, because for most coaching staffs, you're going to teach your players, when the ball goes away from you, you jump to the ball and you get in this gap. You fill that gap. So the difficulty of this is, as this guy comes off the ball screen, there's a temptation for this defender to I got to stay and help, and as soon as he does that, he just gets blindside lit up. And you get a wide open shot there. Then after you do that a few times, then this guy says, well, I don't want to stay here and get killed anymore. I'm going to start chasing my guy, which opens up the space for the guy to penetrate. To go a little further with that, if you came off this ball screen, and the big guy came high and you didn't necessarily get a shot off of this, no problem. The big man would roll. This guard could fill on the baseline side and he could cut through, and you could throw it to a wing and we would be right back into the offense.
Coach, just a question on some of the reads. You talked a little bit about reading screens. I had mentioned I'd wanted to ask this because I know how important that is to a motion offense.
Yeah.
With these basic actions, are there what are some of the different reads or some of the things you've seen happen? You have that flare screen and, initial flare screen, but are there some other reads and things that can happen, or even off the ball screens? What are some of the other things that, or reads that players have off that basic action?
Yeah, I think most of the reads are pretty basic. When you receive a screen, if you're being chased, you curl, so on and so forth. I think the higher quality or the more advanced cuts and reads come when teams start overplaying the action. So, for example, when teams start to overplay the action, in that the ball's on the wing and we're setting a flare screen here, if a team starts to overplay this and not let you cut over the flare screen, then you get into a little bit more advanced reads, and you can do a rim cut there, and dive there, and all that does is essentially take away the flare screen and set you up for the rescreen. Okay, so there's some kind of higher IQ cuts that come once teams start to take away these cuts, and then as your players get even more advanced in the system, the movers can read each other. So, for example, if you did have this cut here, if you did have this overplay here and he cut down the middle, and this offensive player saw him make that cut, they could communicate a little bit, and maybe he come off this screen and he come off this screen. Okay, you see how as long as the players are balanced within this offense, as long as the movers are balanced in that one player's in kind of this passer pocket up here, and one player's on the left and one player's on the right, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And then you kind of get those guards working together, and you can be kind of creative with it, and get a little bit closer to true motion, in that they're kind of making more random decisions. But yeah, those are kind of some extra higher IQ cuts that your players will have to learn to make once teams start to overplay it. One thing I do want to jump into, if you don't mind, is just talking briefly about the continuity aspect of this offense. So you'll see this offense. I mean, a lot of NBA teams have stolen this. A lot of other teams in college basketball have stolen the action of baseline screen, flare screen, but most teams only run the action one time. So they'll run the baseline screen, flare screen, and that's it. And they'll be done with it, and they'll go into an isolation thing. But with this offense is, if you're running it truly the way it was created to run, it is a continuity-based offense where you can keep running it. So, for example, if we get a trigger dribble here towards the middle, we get a flare screen and a baseline screen. So if we throw it to this guy on the baseline and he doesn't have a play to be made, he's going to look into the post, and everybody else is going to get set up in their position. So, again, you'll have the ball on the wing. The man who trigger dribbled and passed, he'll be at the top. The guy who came off the flare screen, he'll be in this position, and the big will still be in good shape. And then when he trigger dribbles, you go again, same action. And then as that advances, if you get to the third option, in that you set the flare screen, you set the baseline screen, if you get to the third option and he comes off the rescreen and you don't have anything there, he doesn't have a shot, no problem. You just made a wing entry. The man who trigger dribbled, who threw to the rescreen, he's now at the top of the key. The big man who set the rescreen, he posts up after a down screen. The guard who cut off the baseline screens over here. The backside big knows his rule that when the ball's away from him, he goes high, and then you trigger dribble, and the wheel goes the other direction. Now you have a flare screen here, a baseline screen here, and a rescreen there. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I have two questions looking at that. One is, how often do you find that continuity aspect is happening? And the second question is, do you find the teams defensively try to do things like, I was watching the trigger dribble and I'm like, do they try to, it would be more ball screen terminology, but like, I'm thinking down that player, I'm thinking push that player away from the trigger dribble, which of course means they do have that baseline screen. But I'm curious what defenses do to try to contain the offense. I'm thinking of different things, and I'm finding it very difficult because there's so many options off of it. So it's pretty cool. But just, I guess, those two questions: the continuity, and what do you see defensive teams do most frequently to try to contain you?
Yeah, I would say the most obvious thing right away is to try to ice that or down it, or really get on the high side and not let them trigger dribble to the middle. That can work at first, but after you make those initial cuts and that initial screen, it's really hard for the guy to chase off of a down screen and then jump on the high side and prevent that from keeping going. And the more you jump on the high side, you start getting your players to say, well, if they're going to overplay that much, just make a north-south drive right to the rim, and we got something happening here. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can try to overplay the systematic action, but at the same time, if you have players who understand the system, they're going to figure out ways to get it done. And as you evolve in the offense, the trigger dribble becomes less and less important. You don't necessarily always have to trigger dribble. I think when you're starting to teach it, you want to teach that trigger dribble. But as the kids start to understand, you can catch, square up on the wing, look, and the actions can happen there. And then it doesn't matter if you ice it or not, so I think there are some ways to disrupt it a little bit by overplaying the actions, but at the end of the day, we want our offense high and wide. So I prefer our ball handlers to be playing from, the NBA 3-point line. And when you start icing somebody from the NBA 3-point line, you're going to have some big issues defending the paint.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was envisioning, as I was thinking about that, you obviously have the baseline screen, but I'm like, you have a good point guard. They just hesitate, cross, and they're in the paint now. And now there's all kinds of issues that can happen with that. So the continuity aspect, is that something that happens frequently within this offense?
Yeah, I think the more I think a little bit comes down to the type of team you have, the type of mentality the coach has. Obviously at Virginia, they're playing a slower style. They're playing a methodical style. Not that I think people get a misconception of Virginia's style in that they're stalling or whatever it may be. They're not stalling. They're getting a great shot. They demand a great shot every time. Most coaches don't demand a great shot. If you don't demand a great shot, you're going to take shots really quickly. If you demand a great shot, especially when you're playing in the ACC, it's going to take a little longer. Okay. So, I think the continuity offense, the continuity side of it comes in often. And frankly, I think the lower levels I've gotten or I've seen it played, the more the continuity comes into it. At Virginia, when you have, NBA caliber players who can make individual plays on command, I think the continuity aspect of it is different. Then maybe as you lower the levels, the team aspect of it, the system aspect of it comes a little bit more into play. But I think on all levels, the continuity side of things, where the offense just keeps flowing no matter what, is so vital, so good.
Coach, before we jump into some clips, which I'm excited to see, I want to ask, I hear people say, and I know you addressed this a little bit early on, that Virginia's not running the mover blocker offense. It's a motion offense. But what I'm seeing is that it's based on the mover blocker offense, and it's just, some different actions that they're using to kind of get into it. Could you speak to Virginia versus kind of the traditional mover blocker? Is that just more free flowing and it doesn't start with that flare action and that baseline screen? Is that the biggest difference?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of film on the Badgers when when Dick was there and my dad was there and they were running it, and the principles of mover blocker, and Dick would call it lane or wide. So lane for Dick essentially meant that his screeners were mandated to stay along the lane line. So they would just screen with these areas. And then if he had a player who was more skilled, a big man who could step away from the basket and make shots a little bit more, he would go wide, or sometimes he would go lane wide. If he had a big guy who was more of a post-up player and a four-man who could shoot it, he would give the four-man the options to screen way out here or come out and get a catch out here, and then hold his less skilled big man in the post. But basically the only difference is that in this offense, the cutters have tracks that they go on. They know where they have to cut, but the motion principles stay the same, that when they get to the screen, they still read it. Now, in Dick's motion that they ran at Wisconsin, the cutters had no rules. They had no places where they had to go. So if they set a down screen here and they caught it here, this guy might cut over here, and then this guy might read a screen here, and the guards were just more free to go anywhere on the court, opposed to Virginia's offense, in that they've kind of honed in where their cutters go, so to speak. They tell them which screens to cut off of, but then the motion principles come out and they read those screens. So like I said, it's kind of right in the middle of true motion and continuity offense.
As we transition here into some video clips, I have to ask, because I have coaches will watch this from all different levels, high school, college, even youth coaches. Is this something that you use at I know the college level, and I know there's aspects of it we see at the professional level. Did you use this at the high school level? What was the offense you guys ran when you were playing? And would you recommend it, or do you think it can be used by high school teams? I'm seeing a lot of good things I think could be used at that level, but I'm curious with your expertise.
Yeah, when I was in high school, it wasn't invented yet. I think Tony came up with it, and man, that would have been, I'm not sure, probably 2012 or 13 or so. But I've seen, many high schools I've seen run this and find success with it. It's difficult to guard. I think it gets a little bit more challenging at some high school levels when the size difference is pretty, similar. If you get a team of, a bunch of guards, or you just don't have two big guys, it can be a little bit difficult to manage that. But at the same time, you can find, at the high school level, you might have a great defensive player who's just a bruiser and not skilled. He's a offensive lineman or whatever it may be, and you can use that guy as a screener even if he's 6'2", and find success with that. So I've seen high schools run it and have great success. Again, the motion principles take a little bit longer to teach. You have to teach your kids to read screens properly before you can run this. But at the same time, it's not as difficult as true motion, because you're at least directing your kids of where they're supposed to go. You're at least telling your screeners where exactly they're going to set screens, so there's not so much confusion with the offense. So I think it works at all levels. I think it's difficult to guard at all levels, especially when you have skilled guards and unselfish bigs who also have high IQs and have an ability to post up and step away from the basket and make shots. There's a lot of things that can be good with this.
I'm seeing that as you're describing it, and I'm looking at the whiteboard and seeing the different actions, and I do feel like it could be good at different levels. I'm excited to jump into the clips. So you want to jump in and take a look at some of these clips?
I have clips from, all different levels. I have clips from Virginia running it. I have clips from us running at the Lindenwood, which was the Division II level. And then I had clips from my teams running it at Millikin my first 2 years. So you're going to get Division I, II, and III teams running it, finding good success doing it. So this was the first year, might have been the first game that Virginia ran this offense. So here you can see there's the basic wing entry, okay? And this time you can see Malcolm here. Malcolm he didn't cut underneath. He didn't do anything. He just saw his guy kind of jogging back, and he said, screw it, I'm just going to get a wing catch right here, and we're going to start, okay? And then you can see everybody kind of gets into position here. So you have your wing entry. We're playing high and wide, which is good. And back to talking about icing, if this guy decided to ice this, you got so much space over here. I just don't think teams are going to do that. Okay, so here goes our basic action. There's Malcolm's trigger dribble. That was option 1. London Parentis came off the flare screen. His man chased him, so he curled it. That was the proper read. And then Justin Anderson comes off the baseline screen. His man chases him, and he curls it properly. Good. Gets to the elbow. Nice. Nothing available on that first one. That's fine. We're still in it. You can see the 3 positions are covered. The backside big should come high here in a second. Here he comes. Flare screen, baseline screen, there's the rescreen, and you're touching paint, attacking middle, and making a play there, okay? And you can see how difficult that is to defend. If we go back here, I think Justin misses something pretty wide open right here, right there. You see Malcolm's pretty open right there. And that's the decision that defenses have to make. If you shortcut a really good shooter, he's going to pop behind this flare and get a 3. So Florida State decides to chase Malcolm. This big man's pretty close to Mike Tobey because he was a pretty good shooter. So you're going to get that tight curl. He didn't see it, but then you immediately get that rescreen. Malcolm reads his rescreen properly, and the whole point of this offense is you're trying – frankly, the whole point of any offense is you're trying to touch the paint. If you can touch the paint continuously, you're going to have a good offense. And however you do that, do it. But Virginia does a great job of using their screens to touch paint and then make plays off of that. So you kind of saw the basic action there happen all the way through. You had option 1, option 2, option 3. Okay. So this was my first year at Millikin. Okay, we're starting with traditional down screens. Okay, and these traditional down screens aren't necessarily to get a shot; they're just to get a wing entry. Okay, so there's our wing entry, and here we go. Now we're all set up. There's option 1 is the flare screen. Option 2 is the baseline screen. My kid reads it properly. His man chases him. He reads it properly, squares up, nothing's there. Option 1 is flare screen. Option 2 is the baseline screen. Again, we read it properly, and we get a wide open elbow jumper right there. So you can see kind of that progression that the ball handler has to go through. He has to go through the progressional reads of option 1, flare screen, option 2, baseline screen, option 3, rescreen.
Coach, I'm loving that, as I watch this offense develop and the number of different screens that occur, it's really challenging to do a great job defending them. And then I'm looking at that baseline screen and I'm seeing if you have a great shooter, and really at the college level, you're using this type of offense, you have guys that can come off that and curl or pop to the 3 and catch and shoot. So that puts that big defender in a bind. They might start cheating out a little bit. And then now it's a catch and then a slip or a roll to the basket. And
correct.
Bounce pass. So
yeah.
It just seems like there's so many options. It puts a lot of pressure on the defense.
You're seeing exactly what I wanted to show too. So I'm going to go right into the next clip here, and you'll see most teams call it a pocket pass. A pocket pass is what you'll get off of this action, and I'll show it right here. It puts that big guy in a really difficult position, and that's what motion does. When you set good screens, okay, is the screener's man going to help? And if he doesn't help, our shooters are going to get shots. If he does help, hopefully our guards are good enough to read that screen. So you'll see it here. Here's that baseline screen you're talking about. This kid right here was a really good shooter for us, so they're not going to shortcut him because they'll give him open 3s in the corner. So they're going to chase him, And when they chase him, he gets to the paint, the big guy helps up, and there's your little pocket pass you were mentioning there. So that is just, through practice and, running the offense, in breakdown drills and whatnot, you're going to teach your kids to make those simple reads in that first you read your screen, read the guy who's defending you. If he chases you curl, then your next read is the defender who's going to help. If the big guy helps up, the pocket pass is there, and there you go. So that, yeah, exactly what you saw is perfect. You get that pocket pass often. Now I'll show a few times where they get all the way to the rescreen. Option 1 was the flare. Option 2 is the baseline screen. There's the rescreen. And you see Malcolm does a tremendous job of reading this screen here. Sets his man up nicely, comes off the screen. His man chases him off that flare screen. Good. So he finishes his cut down here, sets his man up. Then he reads this man defending Malcolm, shortcuts the screen. Okay. He shortcuts that screen, and Malcolm puts his foot in the ground and pops back there and gets a wide open shot there. Misses it, but that's a really good shot for Malcolm to take, and you can see the availability of the baseline drive off of that as well. Boom, if he doesn't have the shot, then you're attacking baseline. Then this big man has a choice. Do I help here? And if he does, comes the pocket pass, and we make plays off of that. Okay, so Malcolm did a really good job of reading screens, and that's the most difficult part of any motion, is teaching your guards to read screens. Okay, there you can see a little bit of communication as Virginia got more and more of their understanding of it. They just communicated here. London came off the flare screen, and Devin was supposed to go off the baseline screen in the normal action, but London just communicates with him here and tells him to stay. Then London goes off the baseline screen, and Devin comes off the rescreen. So you can kind of see how they just communicated that to each other. They got a little bit messed up. They throw it here to the wing. Now we're in it again. Flare screen. Baseline screen, rescreen. Malcolm reads it correctly. He curls, he touches paint, and there's that beautiful flare action that you get so often. And it's just putting this player in such a bind. You got to think about what he thinks he should do. He sees Malcolm Brogdon, ACC Player of the Year, about to touch the paint. So he's like, man, I got to help my buddy out. As soon as he helps his buddy out, his man relocates away, and he gets hit with a blindside screen so he can't recover, and you get a wide open shot off of that. Beautiful action there. And you just get great shots like that very often if you're patient enough to take them.
Seems like the longer the possessions go in some instances, the more chance the defense is going to slip up. They're going to make a mistake somewhere. They're going to, not get through a screen. There's just, with that continuity piece, it just seems like there's a lot of times where that's going to happen with the defense.
Absolutely.
Just a question about the screening aspect, because, I see great reads. I see them coming off screens, shoulder to hip, and they're tight and they're really using them. Is there something that you would recommend for coaches in practice for them to, as they're teaching this offense, is there a drill or a small-sided game or something that you do to teach players to read screens, or even just basically come off the screens? Because they just do a great job there. They're so fundamental in all those aspects.
Yeah. Breakdown drills are really important for any good offense, but especially motion offense. So we always tried to incorporate all of our shooting drills would try to be motion-oriented shooting drills, teaching kids to come off screens, cut hard, so on and so forth. We would do a lot of 2-on-2 on a side, 2-on-2 breakdown drills where maybe you have a coach passing and then, a guard being defended, a big being defended, and them playing a little 2-on-2 game on a side to learn how to read those screens and such. And just by doing those breakdown drills, I think you can kind of enhance your guys' technique, but also enhance their ability to make sure they're making the proper read. The biggest mistake I see kids make, especially kids who are new to motion, the biggest mistake I see them make is that they decide what cut they're going to do before they get to the screen. Okay, so some kids will start coming off the screen, they're cutting, and they are already thinking in their head, I'm going to flare no matter what. But the issue with that is you're not reading your defender. So a term that I use with our players is check your blind spot. okay? And I think everybody can connect to this because we all drive cars. But right before you get to the screen, I tell our players, when you're about 2 feet away from the screen, you check your blind spot. So you look over your outside shoulder. Where is my man? So right before you get there, where is my man? Then 2 feet before you get to the screen, you'll see if he's right on your butt, that means he's going to chase you and you should curl. If he's separated from you, that probably means he's going to shortcut and you're going to flare. Okay. So that concept, that teaching point, check your blind spot, is really important for players to understand, because then they're making their reads based on what the defense is doing. And we get back to what I talked about earlier, then the defense will be wrong every time. When you guess, then you got a 50-50 shot of being correct as the offensive player. But if you always check your blind spot, you're going to be correct every time.
That's awesome, Coach. I really like that coaching point and relating it or equating it to driving with a blind spot. That's something kids are going to remember, or players are going to remember, as you're coaching them. So anytime you can make something and relate it to something else, I think it really, really does help. Are there any other clips that you wanted to show or take a look at?
Yeah, we can get into just showing that ball screen action a little bit if you want to go into that and just see it. We'll show a couple clips of getting into the ball screen. And like I said, the cue for this ball screen is when we get a perimeter catch off the flare screen. Okay, so there's our wing entry. There's the flare screen. Malcolm reads it correctly here. His man goes underneath the flare screen. He flares it. He pops it back. There's the perimeter catch. Okay, so there's the perimeter catch off the flare screen. The big guy, the guard, everybody on the court knows we're going to set a ball screen. Okay, there's the ball screen, and there's a little two-man game on the open side. Beautiful little action, hard to defend. Okay, here's a little look at us at Lindenwood. There's our wing entry. Flare screen, he pops it, okay? His man went under, so he flares it to the wing. Here's our perimeter catch. Here comes the open side ball screen. As you can see, the big guy on the backside recognizes the ball's away from him, so he starts to work his way high. You can already see this man is in big trouble because his eyes are completely on the ball. We penetrate there. Flare screen on the backside. You had a little pick and pop action. You could see all the options that were open there. You got the pick and pop with our guy who was a shooter, and you could see how open this guy would have been off the flare screen. Okay, so that's a nice little open side pick and pop if you got a great shooter. Okay, here's a little action, same action, but it gets all the way to the weak side flare. So London reads it correctly. They don't throw it to him. We're still in it. There's the perimeter catch. Ball screen. Penetration. Backside flare. Joe Harris gets a wide open three. Okay, so you can see that's just, it's really hard action to guard. You're putting the defense in a really difficult position. They kind of have to pick their poison almost. Okay, option one, option two. I can talk about that here in a little bit, but there's the perimeter catch. Okay, here's the ball screen. There's the backside flare, and you get your shot. Okay, so that action, that open side ball screen action, really difficult to defend.
That ball screen can make a difference, and it's another option that I'm seeing in this offense. And after those initial movements, so what other components are there?
Yeah. So I'm sure any big guys watching this are like, well, what the world? I don't get to touch the ball ever, and they never throw the middle of the ball. But matter of fact, anytime there's a wing catch, anytime there's a down screen, we teach our guards, you catch face up, you look into the post. If your shot's not open, drive's not open, post isn't open, then we trigger dribble. So anytime a big guy sets a down screen, he has an opportunity to post up and receive a post catch. But also you get the opportunity for the big guys who set the flare screens to step. Okay, and this comes back to the basic motion principles of two actions happening at once. If a big guy sets a screen and his man curls, the big guy should read the cutter and pop. Okay, so you'll see that here. We get a wing entry, flare screen, rescreen. There's another wing entry. Now we're coming back the other way. Here's the flare screen. There's the big guy stepping. So you see that big guy has the opportunity to step and pick and pop. And if you have a big guy who can shoot it there, that's a tough thing to defend as well. Is, you know, I think the big guys a little bit get lulled to sleep, and he's kind of sitting in the middle feeling like I need to help everybody, and then his man pops to the 3-point line, and you know that's hard to guard if you have a good big man who can shoot it. Here's a little off of that big catch, we ran a little handoff action. Okay, so flare screen, baseline screen, re-screen. There's the flare screen again. Big man popped. If he doesn't have a shot, he goes into a little DHO, a little designated handoff with our guard on the wing there, and attacks middle. Okay, so you can see how that action flows into there. So that's just another opportunity. You know, we had the perimeter catch off the flare screen equals a ball screen, and then we had a big guy catch off of a flare screen equals a designated handoff with a backside flare. Okay, here it is again. There's the flare screen, okay, and you can see perfectly read. The cutter's man chased, so he curled. The big man went the opposite direction of the cutter. If the cutter goes south, the big should go north. Okay, that's how it works. He pops, gets a catch, no shot. We immediately go into the DHO, but the motion principles still stand. Backside big guy has to be high, and you get that backside flare, and you get an open shot. Okay, you can see that just the beautiful movement that happens out of it, and again, the difficult position you're putting the defense in. Okay, you know, here, this man, in all respects, you got to say, hey kid, you're doing a good job. You're in the gap. You're helping your teammate, but you get blindsided with the screen because of your help, and you get a wide open shot. Okay, so. That right there is the whole offense. You have your basic cuts, first option, second option, third option. You have your two kind of break off options, which are the ball screen and the designated handoff, and you're playing. Your kids are reading screens, you're making plays, and it's really difficult to defend if you run it properly, if your kids are well trained enough to read screens. The one thing that I do want to touch on that I think is one of the hardest things to teach about this is the progression that the ball handler has to go through as he makes these reads. So I use the analogy of football for my players, in that when you have the ball, you're the quarterback. And just as a quarterback who drops back goes through his progressions, he drops back, he looks for the quick slant, then he looks for the fly route, then the third option, if those aren't open, is the flat, and he throws it to his running back. Okay, so he kind of progresses through those three reads. Same way, our point guard should progress through the three options here. They trigger dribble. Option one is the guy coming off the flare screen. His eyes should be on that. As soon as he sees that option isn't open, he needs to progress. His eyes need to move to the opposite side of the field in football terms, and he needs to check option two, which is the baseline screen. As soon as he sees that's not open, reverse field again. Option three is the rescreen. So kind of that progression that the point guard has to go through his reads is really important, because kids who just start doing this, they'll get stuck. They'll get stuck on option one, and their eyes will get stuck there, and then they'll miss option two, even if that guy's wide open, you know? So you want the eyes of the ball on the action that's happening. So really quick progression is what you want your ball handlers to be able to do.
Coach, as I'm watching this, you know, as a coach, I'm like, wow, like this is something that I would love to do with my team. The use of screens. I'm watching teams that are good defensive teams, like, get crushed by that flare screen, and then open shooting opportunities. There's so many things that you can do with this offense. You know, what do you think is the biggest, you know, I know reading screens we talked a little bit about, but what do you think is the biggest challenge for a coach? If I'm a high school coach, I'm watching this, I'm saying, I think I have a group of players that could execute this. What's the biggest challenge? What are some of the things they should be thinking about as they might incorporate? They might say next year, you know, I'm gonna watch this video, I'm gonna read up on it a little bit, and I want to implement this offense. What do you think the biggest challenges will be as they start to think about that?
Yeah, it's, I mean, with any motion, there are very common things that you have to teach your kids. As cutters, patience is most vital of anything. Many coaches have kind of coined it, but when using a screen, you should wait, and wait some more, and then cut. So I think kids get so impatient with their cuts, and that can kind of progress to the second issue, in that nowadays in basketball, just the way kids are being brought up and what they're watching is a fast pace, shoot the ball as quickly as possible type of thing. And this offense, you can get quick shots for sure, but at the same time, if you aren't training your kids to take a great shot every time, I think things get difficult, because they can get frustrated with maybe this is going to take longer than something else we might do. So those two challenges of just getting the kids in the mindset that we're going to get a great shot. Some possessions we're going to come up and within 5 seconds we're going to read the screens correctly and we're going to get an open shot. We are going to take it. But other times it's going to take a little bit longer. It might take 20 to 30 seconds for us to get this shot, and that's okay too. The whole purpose of an offensive possession is to get a great shot. And as you mentioned, if you're playing teams who are used to defending for 15 seconds, if you pound them with 6 or 7 screens in a possession and do that over the course of a 40-minute game at the college level, they're not going to like that. So it's training your kids to have that mentality of, tough, stubborn mentality, in that we are going to get a great shot. We are not going to let the defense dictate the shot we take. And again, I think that's for any good offense, any good coach, whatever offense you're running, whether you're trying to run a fast-paced offense or not, the goal should be to get a great shot. But I think that goal isn't really focused on a lot with most coaches, so I think those are the two biggest challenges that you have with kids is just to kind of get them to be a little bit more patient than they want to be.
Coach, you spoke to this a little bit earlier as we start to wrap up here, and I appreciate your time, but wanted to ask just a couple more questions. And one of them is, there's this notion with Virginia that they, purposely they play really slow, their offense, and it's boring. And I'm watching these clips and I'm excited. And I love watching Virginia, love the pack line. I love watching them play and execute on offense. And that's the way I view it. But people put that out there. And the way I'm looking at it and hearing you talk is, I think they're outsmarting a lot of teams out there. I think they're outsmarting a lot of people or analysts that are watching them play. Sometimes they might get that shot, it sounds like, in the first 5 or 10 seconds of the shot clock. And sometimes they might wait and have more patience. So just thinking about the mover blocker offense, it's not a slow offense. It's a patient offense where you're going to wait and kind of get the right shot for your team. Am I correct in saying that as we kind of break this down?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say by any means, it's a slow offense or anything like that. I mean, you're teaching your kids to cut hard and play fast and all that stuff. But at the same time, any offense that says we are going to get a great shot every time down is gonna take longer to do that, especially when you get to the highest level. When you're playing against the best defenses in the country, they're not going to let you get a wide open shot or a great shot in the first 10 seconds. It's just not going to happen. So Virginia has started to understand, or not started to understand, Dick understood it at Wisconsin, Tony understood it at Washington State and at Virginia, that to beat the best of the best, to beat Dukes and North Carolinas, we're not going to be able to beat the first round draft picks that they have coming out their ears with, an offensive one-on-one action. We have to beat these guys by sending those, first round draft picks who don't want to get hit by 14 screens of possession, and we got to wear them down a little bit, So they play it in a way that, if you read Dick Bennett's book, he had a great quote. He said, and at Virginia now, they're so talented now. They have NBA players out the wazoo, but at Wisconsin, they didn't. and they were playing Michigan State and, Indiana and all these teams that were just so much more talented than them. And Dick said, you don't challenge a thoroughbred to a race on the racetrack. You get a plow horse, you train him well, and then you challenge the thoroughbred to a log pulling contest in the mud. That's what you do to beat the thoroughbred, and Tony has kind of incorporated that mentality at Virginia, and that's why they beat Duke and North Carolina and teams that the analysts may say are more talented than them. They do it because they know that they can beat the thoroughbred if they muck it up a little bit. And that's great basketball. And the purists of the game understand that. The purists of the game can watch good basketball, whether it's fast-paced or a little slower paced, and say, that is good basketball. But the people who are just there for, to be entertained and wowed by the fast breaks and the alley-oop dunks, they maybe won't get as much out of it. But it is good basketball, great basketball.
It is great basketball. And I think as I've, grown as a coach, I've learned to appreciate, different styles, a VCU Havoc style, Virginia with their pack line, their mover blocker, and other teams, across the country that they have all different styles in the men's game and in the women's game. And it's fun to watch the styles and the systems and what people do and see, you can, if you execute it and the players believe in it, you're going to have an opportunity to be successful at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up here, is there anything else related to this offense that you would want to share with coaches who are thinking about using it with their team or who might already be using it with their team? Any other advice or feedback that you have for those coaches?
Yeah, I think anytime you teach a motion offense, you have to go into it knowing that as a coach you need to be patient with this offense. It's not gonna click right away for the kids because there is aspects of freedom, there is aspects of reading, and the players have to get a feel for it. They have to start to learn the timing of things. So it takes a little bit time to teach. Other points that can be made is I think within this offense, there's great opportunities to run specials out of it. So be creative that way and take advantage of your players who have certain skill sets. If you have a 4-man who's a great shooter, try to use the system that you have to do, quick actions to get him a shot. And then the last thing I always want to point out is coaches that I talk to about this offense will always say, I have a couple good shooters who this is going to be great for, but I have a couple drivers who, they're better in, the dribble drive, they're better with the ball screen stuff. And I say, that's fine, but at the same time, any offense can work for a good player because all offenses are designed to do a few things. They're designed to create space. So, whatever that may come from, a screen, an off-ball screen, a on-ball screen, a one-on-one, attacking double crossover thing. All offenses are designed to create space for the ball to touch the paint and create an advantage and then get the defense at a disadvantage and then make the proper play off of that. So anytime I talk to coaches who say, I have some drivers who aren't good shooters, I don't think this offense will be good for them. No. If they read screens correctly, they are going to get space and then they use that space to their ability. So if you have a great screen or a great driver who comes off a baseline screen, they're probably going to shortcut him because he can't shoot very well. Fine. He'll flare, you throw it to him, and then he has a wide open north-south drive to the baseline side. So as long as your kids understand that all offenses are created to create space. And this offense is the off-ball screens are used to give you space. And once that space is created, then use your abilities to create a disadvantage for the defense and make the simple play, whether that's a play for yourself or a play for your teammate. So I think those are just a few things that popped into my head as I was thinking that I think coaches can take away from it.
Yeah, that's great advice, Coach. I really appreciate your time today. Obviously, so many great pointers in terms of, running an offense, a motion offense, and then specific to the mover blocker of Virginia's mover blocker offense. So thank you again for joining me tonight.
My pleasure, Coach. It was a blast, and love talking hoops. I hope coaches can take this from me. And I always put this out there that if anybody ever has any questions, they can email me or find a way to contact me. My email is on the Millikin website. So I'm always open to receiving phone calls or, talking to coaches more about any questions that they have. I love to talk hoops, and hopefully this can grow the game a little bit and help some guys do some good things with their programs.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you can join me again, maybe in the future. Maybe we can talk about the pack line and look at the defensive side of it.
Pack line, baby. If you need pack line talk, I'm your man.
All right, Coach. Well, thanks so much again for joining me, and have a great night.
You got it. Thanks, Coach.